Hi everyone. So in this video we're going to talk about how we can improve scapular protraction by indirectly perturbing or indirectly challenging the behavior of the scapula. So when we look at scapular protraction, it's really all about how we can internally rotate that scapula around the rib cage, the point the glenoid cavity forward, so we can reach the upper limb in front of the body and have more variability to interact with the forces that are impacting our upper limb from distal to proximal. Now, when we consider the behavior of the scapula, we need to consider the scapular behavior within the context of the proximal structures, so mainly the rib cage and the head, but we also need to appreciate the interaction between the scapula and the more distal structures, or distal elements of the upper limb, the joint segments and the muscular segments. In this video here, we're looking more at the interaction between the scapula and the muscular elements of the upper limb. So how well we can challenge the muscular tissues of the upper limb while maintaining that scapular protraction, okay? Because again, the muscular tissues of the upper limb are very important to help transfer forces from proximal to distal, but also distal to proximal. So when we're talking about indirectly challenging scapular protraction, we're talking about how can we pre-position the scapula in protraction and then challenge the capacity of the muscles of the upper limb to handle forces, generate forces as we maintain scapular protraction. So when we're looking at directly challenging the scapula, we're typically looking at something like this, where we're in a quadruped position and we're keeping the elbow a little bit more extended, and we're driving that, we're concentrating that movement through scapular protraction, okay, by reaching the upper limb through the ground. Now, sometimes if a client has a difficulty in protracting the scapula, we may bring the upper limbs back where we have a little bit less flexion of the humerus, so we can drive ribcage flexion with that reach to help. We're essentially using the ribcage interaction to facilitate scapular protraction, okay? But we eventually want to try and facilitate that scapular movement on the ribcage without needing the ribcage to assist. So what we want to try and do to indirectly challenge and indirectly perturb the scapula is to add some challenge to the triceps. Now, we can add some challenge to the biceps as well. We can do that in a separate video. But what we'll do here is move from a strategy like this, where we're reaching the scapula around the rib cage with an extended elbow, to moving the hands onto an elevated surface, okay, where we add a flexion at the elbow. So that adds an element of force production via forearm or elbow extension, which is going to challenge the triceps. Now, this is important because during a lot of real-world movement activities where we're reaching, scapular protraction is often coupled with forearm extension or elbow extension. Very rarely do we want to really keep everything pinned back and then extend the elbow. If you even try that there by retracting the scapula and then try to extend your elbow, you're going to have to extend it down very low. You're not going to be able to bring that humerus up into a lot of flexion to be extended. We need to protract the scapula to allow for that forearm extension closer to 90 degrees and especially above 90 degrees, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to shift that pressure onto an elevated surface. We're going to have the elbows bent, not necessarily 90 degrees, but all we're going to do here is we're going to reach the elbows down to the ground, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to gently reach our head over our fingers. So our head is positioned over the hands, and that's going to add a bit more challenge via that forearm extension. So in this position here, we want to maintain that active reach as we gently build pressure down through the hands. And you should feel that challenge into the triceps. But what we really want to reduce the tendency of doing is letting the chest drop through, which would just retract the scapula, okay? We want to do that by reaching the elbows to the ground and simultaneously driving the hands into the elevated surface here, okay? If, for example, clients can't get the whole hand contact onto the surface, we can have the fists in contact as well, where we reach, drive the fists down, and then maintain that pressure. To further challenge that, we can walk the knees back slightly, because if the knees were in front here, we just have a lot of force being distributed through the lower limbs. We want to try and shift more force into the upper limbs. So to do that, we can slowly bring the knees back behind us, reach the elbows, which will facilitate that scapular protraction. And then all we're trying to do here is see, can we maintain that position and maintain the protraction of the scapula as we handle that load through the triceps, okay? And if you're to hold this for 30 to 45 seconds, typically we'll start with 20 to 30 seconds, And then we can progress into a single hand if the client is more challenged on one side, and then begin to progress from there. What we also need to consider here as well is that when we're reaching the head forward, we don't necessarily want to lean forward too much, because what that will do then is it will add challenge away from scapular protraction into more humeral flexion. Okay, so as we reach further forward, the humerus is going to be challenged in flexion. If we keep the humerus relatively perpendicular to the ground, we can maintain that challenge on scapular protraction and also the extension of the elbow. So again, this serves as a really nice progression from being able to concentrate that capacity to protract the scapula with more of an extended elbow, to then being able to maintain that scapular protraction as we increase the challenge on the more distal elements of the upper limb, because that's really what real-world movement represents. Can we increase the variability of the upper limb, but also manage and share forces across the upper limb while holding onto that variability proximally?